Thank you, guys. I will start off by explaining essentially what we're doing. The commonplace moniker, what we seem to be doing right now, is the whole delivery atmosphere, which I don't think necessarily encompasses what we're focusing on. Whence is a way to essentially feature local goods, the mom and pop shops, the unsophisticated storefronts, the vendors that don't necessarily have the integration capable of proliferating their products through the Amazon Prime and so on and so forth. We have built a B2B system capable of featuring their products within a streamlined app so that anyone within a 20-mile radius of downtown Columbus, or whichever city you're launching, can find those goods and have to their door within 90 minutes. So just as much as we are B2C, we are essentially a way to generate e-commerce traction and marketing for local businesses in and around town. We started off with 7 businesses on day 1. We launched our beta October 1st, 2014. We are now at 53 businesses as of this week. Our plan is to hit 100 hopefully by the end of the summer, as we also seek to expand to Cincinnati, Cleveland, Dayton, and a few other places in and around the state. So I'm going to start off with my motivations for starting Whence, and then I'll get into sort of the geeky side of everything. Bill is correct. My motivation is two-pronged. In the short north, where we're seeing quite a bit of gentrification, I think that you can find that in urbanized and mid-market cities, the same thing is happening where everyone is flocking towards the urban center, rent is rising, traffic is increasing, parking is decreasing, and the storefronts, especially the retail boutiques, the fashion, so on and so forth, they're suffering for it. They get fewer visitors, they get fewer purchases, and they end up closing their doors. Between the span of 2012 and 2014, I saw guys like Milk Bar, Brigade, Substance, Kings Row, a lot of friends of mine closed their doors because of this sort of phenomenon. To put it in perspective, Milk Bar did around $500,000 in 2012. They did about $150,000 in 2014. They're no longer here. I saw that and I said, how can we mitigate that? How can we give that boutique a wider sphere of business than the 2 to 3 mile radius in and around the short north? And that was one of my founding thoughts that led me to start the Whence project with my team. So essentially our model is really simple. We take niche vendors, essentially all the vendors that the city's proud of. Whether it's Catalina's, who Grubhub would never feature because Catalina's wouldn't let them. The great fashion boutiques like Row, Thread, great boutiques in Westerville that no one knows about. All these types of local vendors that whenever you have a friend come in from out of the state or out of the city, you say, hey, check this place out because this place is what Columbus is all about. Like, we wanted to feature those vendors only and leave the big box vendors to the other boys. We're well aware of Postmates and what they're doing. To put it in perspective on our end, if Postmates ever launched in Columbus, we build in their API no differently than we built in Uber's API and use them for a delivery mechanism no differently. All we care about is the e-commerce side. We let the other guys handle the actual logistics side. Right now, as it stands, Uber handles 30 to 40 of our operations, typically daily. Right now, as I mentioned earlier, our existing partners are Uber. When Sidecar launches here and around the country, we plan on partnering with them as they have a logistics system that's more in tune and more fitting of what we're trying to do with delivery. They've sort of set aside their human passenger model and have started to adopt the package delivery model. We plan on working with Sidecar when they launch here and in other cities like Charleston, Lexington, Louisville, so on and so forth. As of today, we launched our partnership with the Hilton. To put that in perspective, our app is advertised in all 532 rooms of Hilton downtown, and our hope is that with 11,300 sets of eyes per month, estimated of course, that will go through that hotel, that we can essentially use that as an audience to generate more business for local vendors in and around the city. This is a flyer that you're going to find bedside of every Hilton. It's really simple. With a simple download and a 30-second setup, you can have almost anything in your room. Almost now, it's the app that brings the best of Columbus to your door. This is a model that we're really, really trying to scale to other cities. We've already begun finding those key vendors in Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Detroit. And as of tonight, we have a second franchising meeting with a team in Dayton that wants to adopt and use the Whence software there. I'm just going to take you through our UI really quickly. It's rather simple. I think it's standard for an app-based marketplace. You select your item. After you select your vendor, you add it to your cart or you buy it now. With your credit card and your address, your default address saved, all it takes is 2 clicks and it's to your door within 90 minutes. Shows your purchase being completed. This is a test. I don't know if you can see the screen. We did a test at the Westin Cadillac in Detroit. Much like we were doing at the Hilton, we tested it there and it worked out really well. Uber picks it up from our HQ in the short north, which we use to house all the procured items. And it's, as long as it's within 20 miles of the city, it's to that person's door within 90 minutes of them ordering that product, whether it's electronics, the dress that your wife needs for the night, the dress shirt that you need for the evening, anything like that. This just shows sort of an interest map of where we do the majority of our business. These are the hot spots throughout the city. Upper Arlington gets a vast majority of our business, whereas you can see Easton's in there too. That's the Exerted Village. However, with a 33-kilometer radius, we travel well outside of 270, even a few miles beyond Western Home, which is not great from a logistics standpoint, but it is still generating more business for the vendors here in town, whether it's German Village, Grandview, or the short north that wouldn't have been achieved otherwise. A little bit about our traction thus far. We've achieved a little bit over 4,000 transactions as of April 1st. I haven't updated that count for May, but these are sort of some of the moments that we've generated and put in perspective. 40% of every single delivery ends up on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, which goes a long way in generating word-of-mouth influence for the brand and decreases our need to have to spend money on Twitter and Facebook advertising, so on and so forth. Essentially, this is just a call to action to try out the app yourself. I would love the feedback. If you have any sort of feedback, constructive or otherwise, just please shoot me an email at web@whence.co. I love question and answer, so I figured I'd open the floor to anyone that had a question about the actual process of building the app from start to finish. And I'll lead it off with this. I had the idea exactly June 22nd, 2014. My 3 co-founders, I'm not technical by trade. I know enough of Swift to know what I'm doing, but and I'm studying JS as best I can when I have time. My 3 co-founders are technical. We all got together. We started building July 17, 2014. I had a very strict deadline of having the app to the door, out of the door rather, October 1st, and we meet that deadline. Actually, we helped build at 8 a.m. in the morning on October 1st. It worked for some people it didn't work, but hey, we got it out of the door. We learned some hard lessons. We were in the App Store November 7th. That's a fact that I'm proud of, and we've been iterating ever since. We have our major rehaul, which is essentially Whence 2.0 that's going to be submitted to the App Store on May 10th, and we will have our web platform finished mid-July with an Android wrapper, hopefully by August 1st. I'd like to open the floor to any questions, because I feel like I know a little bit about project management when it comes to this standpoint. Yes?
I don't know if it'd be helpful, but we can hook your phone up if you want to walk through anything. Just want to throw that out.
That'd be great.
That'd be cool.
Yes, sir.
Can you talk a little bit about how you approach the businesses and how you get vendors online?
That is a great question. On day one, it was very difficult to say, I need you to trust me with your brand, even though my company doesn't exist yet. The first 5 or 6 were very, very difficult to come about. I had a very specific strategy that was spend a lot of money with them at their boutiques or their restaurants or their specialty food stores, and essentially they won't say no to me. That was sort of my strategy. So my initial partners were a Rogue Boutique, bought a lot of stuff for her. My wife, Native Cold Press, Thread, Tiger Tree. And once I had that level of vendor, it began to help the rest fall in place. And that's a strategy that we plan on carrying through to other cities. To put it in perspective, native cold press does about $4,000 to $5,000 a month through our app. They wouldn't have done otherwise. Which, as a small business, that's an extra 3 to 4 people that you can hire part-time to help you run your company and more weekends off. That's game-changing for a small business. To drop in the bucket for a big box store, it's life-changing for a mom and pop shop. So, again, excuse my Super Saiyan background, but I'm going to take you through the app really quick, just to show you sort of what's possible. So, and thanks again for this build. This is pretty cool. We have a trending section showing the most viewed items in the app at any given day. As you can see, it's a mix of hard goods like leather bash and Robert Mason, juice from native cold press, the boss bitch mug from Rip Papery, she's great, and a meal planning list. We have the ability to customize who can view any item or any marketplace vendor. So because I'm not at the Hilton right now, when I click on the Hilton, nothing shows up. All these products are specially made or specially curated for the people at Hilton, and there's a certain discount that is applied whenever they purchase those goods because it's just going down the street. We made a startup weekend section with all the necessities that you might need for the week to get you through, from donuts to pizza to Monster and Red Bull. And as you can see, scrolling through the app, we have quite a bit to select from, ranging from beer to flowers to high fashion to yoga gear, Whole Foods, everything. To put it in perspective, if I wanted pancake balls, it's as simple as me selecting the item. Let's say I am in the mood for pancake balls right now. Click buy it now, and essentially, you get to the point where you're at the address field. It's going to Whence, that address is saved, my credit card is saved. You submit the order, and it's done. We take a lot of pride in what I like to call one-click purchasing because I feel like as an e-commerce guy, that's my background. Anything that can bolster conversion rates is good for the business. Yes?
How would the logistics of product development handle? Is there like an automated system that says, okay, we need something from point A to point B, and then send out a report to Uber to one of the drivers, or is it manual? I guess how's that process?
On day one, it was very manual. It was painful. A lot of sleepless nights. Version 1.2 is going to be built into Uber's API. Their improved API will be in our 1.3 that's coming up May 10th. What that means is the entire Uber process will be native within the app. You'll know what your driver looks like, the license plate, all of that, whenever you actually ask for, whenever you request an item. And for us, what that means is Uber will be waiting there at the venue 20 minutes after the call, so that once we have the item selected, a store associate can walk it out to the Uber vehicle, and the Uber vehicle is taking it to the location. I think that is what's allowing us to launch in other cities like Cincinnati, Cleveland, Detroit, hopefully Lexington and Louisville in the not too distant future, without actually being there.
So do you guys then have a deal set with Uber, or do they just charge you Whence?
Yes.
They bill you guys?
They bill us.
Right.
We pass along the cost
Yeah.
to the user.
Is that usually just straight, no profit off the Uber, but where you
Right.
get profits off the top of the retail
Yes.
or whatever?
So we have a 15 to 30% margin on every product sold,
Okay.
and that's our profit margin, or our operating margin, not our profit margin.
Right.
And yes, we don't make a profit on the actual delivery. I will say this: Columbus is really interesting in the sense that there's obviously a shortage of Uber drivers, and so we see a lot of surging. I have to make the executive decision day in, day out whether or not to cap that, and then find a way to mitigate the cost. Because, to put it in perspective, at certain points in the day, if you want something to Westerville,
Yeah.
it's going to cost you $83.
Especially where are most of them coming from the downtown area,
Yes.
so at least that's centralized.
We build everything from our HQ to that location.
Right.
Because typically, as it stands right now, most of the items are procured at HQ, prepared, packaged, and then shipped elsewhere. We're just now getting to the point where we can deliver from that store to the vendor,
Yeah.
or to the customer.
So what's your alternative? Like, let's say they surge pricing, or there's no Uber. Do you guys just do it
In-house?
manually?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It sucks, but I mean, until they figure out a way to avoid surging for half of the day,
Yeah.
that's what it's going to take. In other cities, in Detroit, Uber's flawless. In Cincinnati, Uber's flawless.
Yeah.
And I look forward to launching in those places where we don't have to highly screen which drivers we use.
Sure.
Because again, those drivers are representing our brand.
Yeah.
So
What made you guys settle on the 33-kilometer radius? Why, would you consider shrinking or growing that, or?
I'm certainly considering shrinking that. I de-incentivize people placing orders outside of maybe 10 miles at this point. It decreases our cycle time quite a bit. Starting off on day one, we knew that we were iOS only. We also went iOS 8 only. So that further minimized our pool. And I knew that if I wanted to have any sort of business impact, I needed to have a wide enough radius to have some numbers.
Minimize traction.
Right, because if I was 270 and under with iOS 8, you're, especially back in October 1st, you're looking at maybe 1,000 people that are early adopters to Apple's new platform. Yes, sir.
So would you change that city by city, for
Yes.
instance?
Yes, it's not uniform.
Yeah.
So in Cincinnati, where half of the city is Kentucky, it's gonna be similar. However, in Dayton, they're going to be negotiating a 7 to 10 mile radius.
And you definitely have like a target audience, like you were saying, Upper Arlington's like your top.
Right.
I mean, obviously you're going to have economic pockets where you're going to be targeting because it is a luxury kind of item more or less because it's kind of a time and money, right? Because it's almost like you're saving time, but how much is your time
Yes.
worth to you kind of thing?
It's a good point. So, if Whence ever gets a bum rap, it's because of the cost of delivery. And to that, I sort of have a rebuttal. I mean, I typically think that anyone here understands the value of their time, especially if you've done any sort of freelancing whatsoever. So if you make over $17 an hour, then Whence is for you. Because that extra hour that you're spending driving, parking, getting out, procuring, getting back in the car, driving to a location or walking, whatever, is an hour burn that you could be using to further yourself professionally. That's actually not a mantra that's shared by the majority of people because, ironically enough, people don't know the value of their time. So that extra $15 for delivery is often enough seen as exorbitant when
It's almost like you pitch it as like expedited shipping, right?
Right.
I mean, people
It's-
pay $35 for expedited.
correct. If you compare it to FedEx, if Mary Roth at Road Boutique wanted to ship a dress to someone that purchased on Instagram to New Albany, that person's going to pay $83 for next day shipping.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a matter of branding and sort of price comparison that I haven't focused on because that sort of thing can be contentious in the consumer's eyes. We're just hoping to provide enough value for the consumers that word of mouth sort of defeats the notion that it's too costly to be valuable. Sorry, you.
Yeah, how have you looked at targeting those rich neighborhoods from a marketing standpoint?
So my background is in e-commerce. I was the marketing chief of Rogue Fitness here in town. Not a small company anymore, about 500 people with about 200 of them being devs or technical. Put in perspective, I've learned a lot about Google search marketing and targeting. I've applied that to Twitter and Facebook quite a bit, specifically Facebook, for several tests throughout the months. So I can take the composite woman, right? I can take like my wife, who I feel like is sort of the composite user for Whence, right? She's better than me, she's more educated than me, blah, blah, blah. I'm trying to get brownie points right now. What that person likes in music and in TV, how educated that person is, their salary, their home price. You can pinpoint all that within Facebook and Twitter at this point. and I exploit that quite a bit. So yes, it has done a good job as far as proliferating the message throughout Bexley, UA, New Albany, so on and so forth, whereas I originally thought that we were going to do really well with college students, but even with the $5 delivery to campus, it's still, that's too expensive for them.
Yeah.
Two questions.
Yes, sir.
How did you find your co-founders? And then what other marketing techniques have you found to be successful?
So the original co-founding team was myself, Jonathan Pomo, who was formerly with Homage and Dynamic. Jonathan went to Miami University, and our junior dev, Adam Linkhart, went to school with him. Adam Linkhart's boss was recruited by Adam Linkhart. Adam Linkhart's boss, Dan Van Winkle, is a full stack dev, just a genius. The four of us started the company. We brought on board another one of Dan Van Winkle's associates at Rocco Wireless in Cincinnati. So we have now 3 devs on our team. I spent the first 2 months trying to get them to trust me, in the sense that I'm not technical, or as technically proficient as they are, and often enough, it's odd for the marketing / operations guy to be sort of the spirit of the company that is very much so a software-based company. We no longer have those issues because I think I've done a decent job proving my value. So at this point, we're running full steam ahead as a company.
Marketing techniques.
Yes. Social media is very important. I spend quite a bit of time on there. Everything from engendering great conversations on Twitter, which sounds really sort of cliche at this point, but when you don't have marketing dollars, it's a very, very valuable means of getting the word out. And also, there are hard goods like the postcards that go out with every single order. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but over 40% of those postcards end up on social media by the end of the day, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. Their friends see it, they're tagging our company via those platforms, and it's at least driving people to download the app, if not trying the app out for themselves for the first time. Yes?
What's your average cart size?
Really good question. I don't know the average cart size, because I'm assuming that we have quite a few abandoned carts. I do know that our average order value is $56.75, which, to put that in perspective, talking to the VC types, we just got back from our Y Combinator interview 2 weeks ago. One of the questions we heard was, is your business model sustainable? Because Postmates, who focuses on food, they're well funded, and it takes quite a few transactions to sort of have any sort of revenue growth. Well, for us, I treat Whence as an e-commerce platform with a delivery component, so my goal is to raise AOV as much as possible. With a 30% margin on a $56 good that we don't own is great. And as long as we're hitting 25 to 30 of those often enough, it does a lot for us revenue-wise. Yes?
One other question. So the shipping fee, is it just a flat fee? You
It's-
add $400 of stuff in the cart?
It's not flat, it's dynamic.
Okay.
So depending on time of day and distance, that is your delivery fee. Unless we manually cap it to prevent sort of consumer disgust caused by Uber surge pricing, which can often, to put it in perspective, at 9:30 in the morning it's 2.8, which to Westerville, again, that's over 98 months. So, yes.
I have 2 questions. You don't have to answer if you want, but did you procure any initial funding, and are you currently in the black? Are you making a profit currently?
So we will be cash flow positive by the end of this month, meaning we will be covering our burn finally. And unfortunately for this lady over here, I funded Whence myself to begin with. I didn't have a better way to do it. It's often enough where we have ideas and it stops at ideas, and I really want to prove that this was more than an idea to me. So we are in the process of fundraising right now, both West Coast, East Coast, here in the city, and we will see how that goes. My goal is to not have to raise money. I know that's really sort of strange for a tech company, but with our franchise model, if we hit just 2 or 3 in the next 2 months, then that's enough runway for us. Our entire core team will last for the year. We're looking at $140,000 per franchise, plus 6% top line revenue, and we have several buyers right now. So, yes.
What went into the decision to use Uber versus hiring your own drivers? How'd you settle on Uber?
I actually learned the hard way that hiring our own team would be incredibly expensive. The first thing I did was I acquired a vehicle lease from Ford, and it just dawned on me that with insurance and cargo insurance and Form H's to deliver alcohol and that person's salary and the expensive vehicle itself, it wasn't worth it. Secondly, I decided early on that though Whence is seen as a delivery mechanism by consumers, which is fine because that helps us from the B2B side, I wanted nothing to do with the delivery logistics side of business. So I said, Uber would be great, if you guys handled the liability of delivery, which is a heck of a lot more cost effective than us handling it ourselves.
Yeah. One of this primarily healthcare in terms of venture and angel funding.
Yes.
What have you found in terms of the technology? Are they becoming more and more welcoming or
I think that we're getting there. I still think that Columbus is known as a healthcare-centric startup community, but it just so happens that we have a lot of stars in that side of the tech sphere. Things are clearly changing. We have a hard run ahead of us as a consumer app, but I think that with the combination of a B2B focus, it can be interesting and appealing to the types of investors in the city that also look to healthcare to make their investments in. Anything else? Yes.
What are your thoughts on the road, traveling around trying to raise money from VCs everywhere? How's that been going? And what's the experience like for you? Coming from Columbus, a little harder to get respect and traction because you're not out of Palo Alto.
Yes. So, like I mentioned earlier, we just got back from Mountain View last week, right? And some of the conversations out there were sort of framed as us being sort of homegrown and folksy, like we didn't have the sophistication to
And bootstrapped and almost in black.
right.
Things that no one cares about. But
Right. It's a knock, but at the same time, I think that the attitudes that you can carry forward with you as a Columbus startup are very valuable. I think that, not to go off on a tangent, but I don't think that SV valuations are going to maintain themselves. And I think that eventually the startups that do get out over the next few years are actually generating revenue and have great books, great balance sheet, and that's what I'm focused on. I have to run the business like we're not going to get that top dollar investment, and hopefully I just prove them wrong. Secondly, from a valuation standpoint, there's essentially 3. There's what institutional investors in Columbus see us as, which is typically a heck of a lot lower. There's East Coast, the Harry Vaynerchuks, the Vayner RSEs that we're talking to. They're sort of midstream, and then there's SV that is essentially 7x what Ohio would value us. So it's like if you go out and raise money there and then try to fill it around with local angels here, they're going to think you're crazy. But if you only raise money here, are you valuing your work enough?
yeah.
And so it's a lot. It's a lot, but
Does anyone give you any pressure? Like they might talk to you if you move your team out there. They don't want to travel over here. They don't want to deal with investment that's not in their geography.
I've had a few questions from a few VCs about my willingness to move out there. I don't say that I'm not willing to move out there because that would end the discussion, but it'd be very difficult for my team. We're all 29, 30, 31, founders at least, and we're all family men. 2 of us have kids. It's not as easy as picking up and going. We were willing to consider that very, very strongly for YC for 3 months, but for anything beyond that, it's sort of detrimental to the team. So, anything else? Yes,
So
sir.
with positioning yourself as a startup, or excuse me, as a technology or company or e-commerce, and leaving the delivery part out,
Yep.
the app, and then potentially web interface to come in the future becomes super important. And I know that you guys are really focused on the relationships and the technology and the stack.
Right.
So, with your experience on the technology and the stack stuff, would you say that you found that harder than maybe what you initially thought, or easier, or maybe challenging in different ways than what you initially expected?
100%. I think that our e-commerce presence within the app is subpar. We're trying to fix that from the size of the photos to the ease upon which you can do sizing and that sort of thing. That's a side of the business that we probably neglected to begin with, that I wish we spent more time on because we were focused on the staff. But now we can sort of batten down the hatches and sort of fine tune all those details to hopefully make it easier for people to buy higher end goods without worrying about whether or not the sizing is sufficient, things like that. So now that the quote-unquote technology is in place, I can focus on what I really want to focus on, and that's becoming a really great mobile e-commerce company.
So even though you have an e-commerce background with resume stuff, like growth stuff,
Yep.
you're operating in a new environment though, because I don't believe in either one of those cases you had to deal with Apple and the App Store.
Correct.
What's your experience been like there?
Incredibly frustrating, but it's a learning process. I mean, it's a 10-day turnaround after the app's middle. And you know that if Meerkat launches their update, they're getting first dibs within 48 hours, things like that. But it's capitalism, I guess. We wish that we had a 4 or 5 week dev cycle with a team this small and with guys that have other obligations. We can only do the best we can. My only hope is that until we do get our act together, until we are completely professional and everyone's full time and things like that, that we continue to make the city happy and the city continues to support us in the meantime. Cool?
Yeah, second, one other question. The franchise model, that's a little unusual for a tech startup. So how'd you end up in that? How's it going so far? What are your thoughts on
Yes.
that as financing that?
So, I'm a brand guy at heart, and we were a brand before we had a piece of technology. It resonated with a lot of people. Early on, we saw a lot of people say things like, how do we get Whence into our city? What can we do to bring Whence here? And I'm like, man, we'll get there when we can get there. And then the conversation started evolving to, well, how do we help you get it here? How do we become involved? And I just sort of had an epiphany that this could be a great way to generate early cash flow without having to, and also at the same time without having to adopt the similar model of the Ubers, the Postmates, so on and so forth, of dropping $200K per city to upstart. So more collateral on the way from key blueprints. So anyways, that's where we are now. I just felt that having to generate revenue early, that was a good way to go. Wanting to achieve 117 cities in 3 years, that's a good way to go. And hopefully it pays off. There's a lower upside for us because we're not in control of the territories, but there is a way to potentially get to a $15, $20 million annual revenue mark with this model, which is our goal.
So, okay, thanks.
Cool. Thank you, guys.